you have won. Congrats on your primary victory, by the way.
Thank you so much.
You're in a purple state, and you have been openly, as a democratic socialist, running and winning. What have you learned in your sort of experience in what has been historically a swing state, that you think these candidates should know about?
Well, Virginia is a swing state, but my district up until me had been held by Republicans for over 40 years. My predecessor was a member of Republican Party leadership who had essentially unlimited corporate backing. He could have spent as much money as he possibly wanted. He had been winning with about 9,500 votes in my very small district for his entire career. And on Election Day of 2017, I was able to go out there and talk to thousands of working class folks who had checked out of Virginia politics for a very long time. And we got 11,366 people to the polls. It's by far the highest turnout for any Democrat in a House 50 race that we've seen in living memory. And this is the key. We have people by the millions in this country who have checked out of the political process. If none of the above were a candidate in the 2016 election, none of the above would have won 43 or 44 different states. So the strategy of leaning into that attack, of saying, if you're to the left of Barry Goldwater, they're going to call you Joseph Stalin anyway, and going out there and saying, yes, I'm a socialist. Here are the policies that are going to make your life better. We're going to put you in charge of your workplace. We're going to make sure that you have the freedom to live and work and not have to worry about how you're going to put food on the table, not have to worry about how you're going to make the rent or see a doctor or put your kids through college. You make that case forcefully to people who have not traditionally voted, and they will show up because they finally feel like they have a chance to make their lives better. That's how we'll beat Donald Trump.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live from downtown Brooklyn, USA, where left is best, as it is everywhere else, with super producer Matt Leck.
Hello.
Chief economist David Griscom.
How's it going?
Super producer David Slavic, roaming the digital sphere in the ever-expanding, ever-growing, ever-global TMBS universe. On this week's program, she has been upgraded from crew to sometimes co-host. Alona Minkowski is here. She's in a tracksuit, and she's ready to talk about the meaning of life. Well, you know what the arc is. If you really want to know what's on Alona's mind, you got to become a patron, and you will see it in the post game, because she will be ready. On this week's program, we are talking about Bernie Sanders welcoming their hatred. He gave an incredible speech. We'll get to that in the commentary. The secret CIA group trying to organize war with Iran. Apparently, the United States intelligence apparatus is hacking Russia. Donald Trump is freaking out, threatening the New York Times, and the usual suspects who have caused us all of these problems to begin with, including in some respects Donald Trump, they're cheering it on as the deep state thirsts for war with Iran and disruption of Russia. Also, Donald Trump announces a brand new terrorism campaign against undocumented people in this country. Those are two stories, Russia and immigration, that Alona is going to lead us through. We have a gem, G20, economics, and security with David Griscom. In the postgame, we're going to talk about the labor context behind the uprisings in Hong Kong. We're also going to talk about Bernie Sanders, why he gets global solidarity, calling for the freeing of political prisoner Lula da Silva, even as minutes before we go to air, massive new revelations in Brazil, the Lava Jato team's corrupt dealings with former president Enrique Cardoso. Anybody who follows Brazil could see that one coming.
And then the worst cover-up ever.
The worst cover-up ever. Solidarity with Glenn Greenwald and all of the Intercept team facing death threats and fascist threat in Brazil as they reveal this incredibly important story. A debunk New York Times housing nonsense with Ben Burgess, and a whole bunch of other sounds to get to, including some more news from Cornel West outlining the stakes of this campaign. And sorry, Yangers, when your candidate says what we say he says, and then you whine about us saying what he says, And then he says it again. We're going to play it. I will do my best to not make fun of him and try to be serious for the 3% of you that can actually hear the point. Rest of you, you're going to be very upset. But stop strawmanning our positions. Stop strawmanning us. You should steelman our arguments of our analysis of Andrew Yang's feudal future for all of us. All of that and more on this week's Michael Brooks Show. But first, let's start with Bernie Sanders' speech on democratic socialism, which he delivered at George Washington University last week. And I actually did a video on this specifically for the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel. This was an incredibly important speech, and it was a dialectical one. His speech was class conscious. He juxtaposed an oligarchy versus the people and argued that the working class struggling for economic, racial, gender, and gay liberation would bring us into the future and defeat the sort of prime threats of today, which are unfettered capitalism and the emergent threat of authoritarianism that arises in that capitalist context. He wisely tied his perspective to the FDR tradition. And again, we're seeing this similar dynamic play out a lot in Sanders' campaign. On one hand, there's people that are wanting to pivot to a candidate like Warren that does not have the systemic understanding that Sanders brings to it and is focusing on sort of technocratic, in some cases very positive, but technocratic, non-systemic solutions. And then they're sort of undervaluing Sanders' systems argument and actual diagnosis of the crisis we're in that sets him apart from the other candidates. Then there's the sort of let's play revolutionaries on Twitter that are upset that instead of FDR, Bernie should have been like, foregrounding Fidel Castro in this speech. Okay. The reality is that he is anchoring a profoundly important and unprecedented in modern politics argument for economic rights as the center of politics by wisely linking it to a profoundly important tradition in democratic politics, whether you like it or not. That's the reality. Bernie's commitment to the socialist tradition and socialist movement is central to the reason that he is able to articulate the stakes and the central battle lines of today's politics. Here he is breaking it down with Chris Hayes.
Well, let me ask you this, though. So one of the sort of touchstone points in the speech is about FDR and the New Deal and the Economic Bill of Rights. And again, I would agree with you that his critics called him a socialist, and by today's terms, he would be called a socialist. But FDR didn't call himself a socialist. The socialists at the time said that he was peddling pale pink pills, that he was basically a sellout capitalist. He probably did that for a reason, right? I mean, that was a political judgment by FDR about his own efficacy. Why does the word matter more than the agenda?
Because it is imperative for people to understand. Look, a lot of people are going to say a lot of good things. But for two reasons, I think the word democratic socialism is relevant. Because if you are serious about, defeating Trump's authoritarianism, which, by the way, is an international phenomenon, you have to do what Roosevelt... You know what?
It's the deep state interfering with our show. Aren't you happy I'm not Sam Cedar or Lou Dobbs right now? Okay. We can't get it? Okay. Please refresh it. And it's not just that Bernie, though, is pointing there. Okay, we have it.
International phenomenon. You have to do what Roosevelt did and say, you know what? I am taking on the ruling class. And you remember, I mentioned this yesterday. And these people hate me. And I welcome their hatred. In other words, you cannot go forward unless we are prepared to take on incredibly powerful special interests. There is no shortcut around that. And second of all, when I use the word democratic socialism, what I mean is not that, we got to improve the healthcare system. I mean that economic rights are human rights. People are entitled to healthcare, to education, to a clean environment, to retirement security, to decent housing. This is not just some abstract idea. Freedom of speech is what America is about. I believe that economic rights must also be about what America is about.
So it's not just that Sanders has the right policies, and he absolutely does. And the sort of myth of him not offering specifics is fading on a daily basis as he outlines, as an example, aggressive plans on education, which are formulated in part by teachers. God forbid they be involved in the formulation of major national priorities with regards to education. It's that by understanding the stakes and understanding that the central conflict is about class difference in politics, it's not about some kind of intellectual argument. The reason that Amazon runs our economy, the reason that there's skyrocketing inequality, the reason that people don't have health care, the reason that foreign policy is run the way it is run is not because people haven't thought of clever solutions, and it's not because people are waiting to be persuaded to give up their power, privilege, and access. It's because, in fact, of that raw power disparity. So what Bernie is doing is expanding the playing field and consciousness of people, which is going to be fundamentally necessary to implement even a more modest program than the one he's proposing. The job of the left should be articulating how we are going to use the momentum behind his presidential run and the potential for the presidency to continue this project. I want to talk about Marx's relationship to the French Workers' Party program of 1880. You know, we talk about Marx's critique of the Gotha program as his very perceptive critique of the limits of social democracy if you don't have large monopolies decommodified. But conversely, this is his thoughts on the French Workers' Party program of 1880, and where he famously stated, "I'm not a Marxist." And we'll scroll down. We have this on screen. Let's scroll down to the, if we have it, the economic rights section that Marx had. And I'll read along with it. Basically, Marx advocated a program that included gender pay equity, reductions in the work week, universal education, state aid for elderly and disabled people, among other demands. French party leader Jules Gued, who helped write the program, later pushed for removal, claiming that removing the minimum section would free the proletariat of its last reformist illusions. Marx responded by saying that Gued was not a radical, but a revolutionary phrasemonger, and famously wrote to Engels that if this is Marxism, I'm not a Marxist. In other words, this founder of a pretty radical tradition and a very shrewd understanding of how to look at the world and how to look at capitalism was someone who, in a very pressured context, was able to see that profoundly important advancements in terms of wages, in terms of labor protections, in terms of time, and in terms of an expansion of rights was the foundation upon which new rights were created, new expectations were created, and new demands were asserted. That's what Bernie Sanders is doing in our politics in a completely unprecedented way, in modern politics at least. That's why we need to support his campaign fully and unequivocally, recognize the profound opportunity that it presents if you care about things like every single human being having health care, like the serious response to wealth concentration in this country, and then start taking the next steps to put into play things like nationalizing and decommodifying the natural resources and oil industries. I mean, these are very comparable, obvious places of why on earth should those be privately absorbed from the public commons to be exploited and cause enormous societal damage. We can be innovating ideas of how markets can work in a social context, what needs to be decommodified, and where we can get sort of more visionary in our ideas and demands. But if you don't see that Sanders' campaign is the absolutely unique conduit for that, you either probably don't actually share a systemic understanding of politics, and you don't have the strategic capacity to even implement a reform program, or conversely, you're doing some cosplay bullshit that has nothing to do with what we actually need to achieve for real, actual human beings. And that was the significance of Bernie's speech. I just want to add really briefly with this quote. This is from an excellent piece that ran in Jacobin by Kianga Yamada Taylor. Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism speech was a landmark. The white supremacists that head the Republican Party want us all to believe that the biggest problems in this country are not their grotesque policies that steal the wealth of the many and redirect it to the few. Instead, they point the finger at Mexicans, Muslims, and the quote-unquote blacks. Sanders did not resort to flowery homilies that claim that this weaponized racism isn't quote unquote us, or it is somehow outside of the norms of the American politics or other tribe. Instead, he argued that the wealthy's use of racism to destroy the living standards of otherwise ordinary workers by constantly fraying the mutuality that otherwise bind us together, quoting Dr. King. So that is what is so unprecedented and important about this effort. Do you guys have anything to add before we get to the shout out?
I just really wanted to hit home the point that, being a radical in this moment really is doing the political work where you're saying, here's an opportunity that we have to radically decommodify a lot of the U.S. economy when we're talking about universal health care, when we're talking about Bernie's idea for implementing a worker ownership program. I mean, these are really important moves that we can make, and it's really important if you look especially at the early history of Marxist and socialist parties, is that this is the double move, right, where you say, look, here's an opportunity that we have like the political ability to put this into practice, and we're going to be very clear with our supporters and our members why this helps us get to this next place. And that's why Bernie Sanders is so radically different from Elizabeth Warren, even in that in his democratic socialism speech, because he was able to say, here's what we want to do, and also here are the ideals that are guiding us and this idea of what we want to be getting to. And having that kind of politics is something that's so important to being a radical and being a socialist, rather though than what some people do, these revolutionary phrase mongers, who aren't actually trying to develop political consciousness in this country. They just want to say like, oh, well, I have a great vision for something, and then there's no way to get there, and it's sort of useless.
Absolutely. Yeah, Matt.
This sort of just reminds me of this Tia Rio Franco's tweet from a few weeks ago. Warren's call for economic patriotism resonates with the xenophobic right. A lot of people were upset that I retweeted this, but Tia goes on to say, that's because it assumes mythic unity between American bosses and workers aligned against foreign competition, but workers and bosses' interests cross borders.
That's exactly right. And I'll just say just on the flip side, even if your politics are, less imaginative and you just sort of want to kind of nibble at the edges of the regulatory state, there is no way that you are going to be able to implement even some decent Wall Street reform without the kind of unparalleled grassroots army that Bernie's creating, which is a completely different thing that needs to be emphasized constantly. And of course, that's before we even get to foreign policy. But we got to get to the shout out so we can get Alona up here. Alona's texting with her dad about Chernobyl right now.
Let's get to the shout out.
It's like, was it true, Papa? I don't know, man. I got to tell you, I love this track, but DJ Danarchy, if the new stuff coming out of that trial is real, we might need to switch up this song.
It is creepy.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah. All right. So the shout out for today, this is an incredibly inspiring story. It was pointed to me by our friend and crew, Joshua Khan, who will be back in studio in July. This was a court ruling that happened in Ecuador in late April. And it's in a native tribe to Ecuador fighting against the Ecuadorian government to protect 500,000 acres of Amazon rainforest from oil drilling. And the Waorani people won a landmark victory. This is pretty unprecedented. I mean, of course, these are court systems that are rooted in a different order anyways and routinely disregard the rights of indigenous people. And this is really, especially in a place like Ecuador, even Rafael Correa, who was a very important pink-tide president, did a lot of very good things. There was a lot of failings with regards to his record for indigenous people. So let's scroll down a little bit. I'm going to read a little bit from this report in Amazon Frontlines. Today, this is from April 26th. Today, the Waorani people of Pastaza won a historic ruling in an Ecuadorian court protecting 500,000 acres of their territory in the Amazon rainforest from being earmarked for oil drilling. The decision by the 3-judge panel of the Pastanza Provincial Court immediately voids the constitutional process with the Waorani undertaken by the Ecuadorian government in 2012. indefinitely suspending the auctioning of their lands to oil companies. The verdict also disrupts the contemplated auction of 16 oil blocks that cover over 7 million acres of indigenous territory, provided by an invaluable legal precedent for other indigenous nations across the Ecuadorian Amazon. So I'm sure they're going to fight this, and we're going to keep up on this story and talk with Joshua about it when he's on the show. But this is an incredible victory, and it is this week's shout out. We're going to do a brief pitch, and then we're going to come back with the great Alona, and we're going to talk about Chernobyl, tracksuits, money laundering. Just piling it all on. I was reading this great book, McMafia, actually, which we'll talk about later. So, guys, we continue to obviously grow. That's how we can sort of continue to expand our offerings, do new things, innovate a little bit. It happens through you, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Obviously, our next goal is 3,000 patrons, which I think we should be able to meet relatively soon. Over the coming weeks, you'll notice that our social media game is being amped up and a lot more sophisticated on Twitter, but it'll also soon be on Instagram. And part of what you're going to get is you're going to get a lot of audio, or some audio nuggets, at least 1 or 2 weekly, of the illicit histories, of the idea primers, of the stuff that you get when you're a patron. The post game is really fun, and the post game is like the great complement and extension of this show in terms of just like interacting with us, taking calls, taking Discord questions, having a good time, reviewing a lot of important stories, also fucking around a little bit. We'll be telling the Joe Rogan, Michael Roberts saga in tonight's post game as an example. But then the illicit histories and the idea primers and the think tanks kind of offer a totally different sense, really, of, I would say, literally a global political education. So you're going to get more and more of a dose of that. Become a patron today at patreon.com/TMBS. On August 24th, so far with Gene Bajalan, and there might be another guest announced soon, we're doing our 3rd live show, this time in Chicago. Chicago Midwest Left is Best Fest. We announced tickets earlier than usual, and we're already over a third sold out. So they're going fast. And again, as always, there's going to be that massive spike in the end. So the links will be in all of the notes for how you can buy them, but go get your tickets today to the Chicago live show. And of course, first and foremost, patreon.com/TMBS. We're going to take a brief break, and Alona is going to join us. Привет. Misha Brooks show. Program. I don't know. Fucking Russian gibberish.
Misha Brooks.
Misha, right? Isn't that Michael in Russian? Am I wrong?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, don't
Misha.
fucking laugh when I nail it.
I know a lot of Mishas.
Yes, you do. Welcome, Alona Minkowsky, TMBS co-host.
Woo woo! Thank you.
This is awesome.
This is fun, except for now I have, I guess, more responsibility instead of normally I just get to come in and get drunk and run my mouth.
Yes.
Now I have to read things
That'll
beforehand.
be part of your portfolio. I like, again, it's always, I've said it a million times, but I just love the arc. The arc of like, let's do the arc together, actually. You've only had a few sips, so we'll get to this story later, but I'll just like pretend that it's a normal show and I'm announcing it. So, and I get into this mode too. I can do it. It's like, so Alona, recent reporting on U.S. Cyber Command and the Russian power grid. What's your sense of this? Is this a provocation? And then you're gonna, and then you go like,
yes, Michael. Actually,
yeah, right, exactly. And then you're like, and then,
like an hour and a half more, and then I have to come back and work a full day. And
was
so it was.
What is the Russian mindset behind doing that?
It was so brutal. It's because there was a period where, there's some channels out there, like if you have cable, where they show an hour a piece of different international news channels.
Right.
And so RT had signed up for something like that or made a deal. And it
back,
just so
guys?
happened.
We're back.
All right.
Hi guys.
So
we're back.
Just an
tell us
update.
give us a tech update.
So basically, Wirecast, we got the spinning volleyball of death.
Hold
sort
on
of.
one second. Matt,
spinning
can
wheel
you
of
give me
death.
my sound?
Your sound is up.
All right.
And but we logged on. Now all the shots we had made are lost, so it's gonna maybe the visual product will look a little bit less polished than it usually would. But
will it get fixed as
we
we're
are
doing the show?
it is a work in progress. So
Work
yeah.
in progress. All right.
God damn it, guys, work faster.
Wow.
A new co-host.
See? Yeah. She's all friendly
with
when
an iron fist.
she's all friendly when she's she actually
Be careful. I control your shot.
It's true.
I didn't want to tell you this, but because I didn't want to make you guys feel nervous. But when Alona and I were having drinks talking about doing this, she literally was like, "This would be great honor to do, but I recognize you treat your worker like human. I do not." So she was like,
That's exactly.
she was not fucking around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a very intense
Yeah.
accent as well.
They don't have the Eastern Promises soundtrack on Spotify.
Oh.
I want the
Really?
Eastern Promises soundtrack.
I've still never
Yeah.
seen that movie. And
Seriously?
it's just that people, throw it out.
That
my
is like a
way
legit
because
good
of
movie,
jokes
though.
all the time. But anyway, just to finish my story
Yeah, tell
really
me.
quick. I was constantly sleep deprived, didn't have any idea what was going on, and so one time, it's like I've seen this happen to other people, but sometimes you get really nervous on live TV, especially when you're just sitting there in a studio with all the lights shining on you and there's not a person you're
Right.
talking to, because it was with the anchor in Moscow, and so it's just like this little black box zooming in on you. And I think I just stopped talking mid-sentence, like completely lost my train of thought and just froze and then just sat there just staring at the camera. And thank God the anchor figured it out after 5 seconds. He goes, "All right, Alona Minkowsky in Washington. Thank you very much." And they were like, "Cut!" And got the camera off of me. But it's things happen. Live
Things
TV
definitely
can be
happen.
scary. I've seen people that are sitting there just completely shaking, and I'm feel like they're gonna have a panic attack, and they're sitting right next to
Oh,
me.
shit.
And you're trying to remain calm, and I want to put my hand on their hand and tell them it's okay,
That's
but the
so
cameras are
intense.
on. Yeah.
I can't. I mean, obviously, I haven't done as much TV nearly remotely as much as you have, but I've never seen. I mean, when I was going on I-24 a lot, the closest that it was that they would have me up against people at times where it was just not the people should have been nervous, you know what I'm saying? They would be like, "Wow, Michael, you're gonna come on," and then we have on Frank. He's a ham rave radio operator. He really likes Trump, and I think you guys are gonna have a spirited conversation. And so I remember this one guy I was on with, and whatever, fuck it, I don't care. Obviously, I won't say his name. I don't remember his name.
Yeah.
But he he really was if you wanted to do, it would almost be hacky to do it, but he really did have a lot of extras in The Sopranos kind of energy. And we were just sitting there, and again, just objectively, he was sweating a lot of sweat.
Pouring.
Pouring.
Yeah.
And it's a close hit, it's right here. And then I realized we're starting to debate torture or something like that. And I realized that every single thing, his answer is always, "I have friends there." So it's literally friends died on 9/11. And he started with friends died on 9/11, which is a real okay, shit. How am I supposed to work with that?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be "Yeah, I don't give a fuck. I'm trying to make a point about torture." You know what I mean? But then it was just "Okay, yeah, I got friends who work in the intelligence agencies. I got friends who work."
Yeah, I got friends there.
So I was by the end of it, it went from me, I was thrown a little bit to
Did
oh,
you start
shit.
saying you have friends
Totally.
everywhere? I hope so.
I absolutely. I
two
was
can
just
play that game,
I was
buddy.
I got friends
I know people.
too. Yeah, that's literally what I did. I was yeah, I got friends. Yeah, I know people.
I once
we can fuck around like that.
I forgot about this. I once had to spend an inordinate amount of time in a green room at CNN with Carter Page. And it was
first
it was one of the more bizarre experiences of my life.
Can you, because I feel because of how crazy this news cycle is, can you remind people who Carter Page is and then tell that story?
The funny thing is I don't, because of how crazy the news cycle is, I don't even remember the whole backstory with Carter Page.
Well, it doesn't even matter. He was supposedly involved with Trump.
Yeah, he
or
was
something,
worked
right?
for the Trump campaign and was an advisor for a short-lived period. Then he was one of the people that was named as, potentially being one of the useful idiots that the Russian government was trying to.
Well, you just got to give people.
Was trying to use and recruit. But he had some type of business. Like now, I'm going to sound uneducated about it because I just don't remember all the details of his life. He did have some kind of business that took him to Russia often, and but then he just became this kind of like weird laughing stock on television all the time, and I had to debate him on CNN. But first I had to spend a while with him in the green room where he was like being so conspiratorial and obsessing over like weird things and just wouldn't shut up for a single minute.
Like about what?
And I just wanted out of there.
Tell me what.
Well, it was mostly because, at the time, I don't even think that the Mueller investigation was really underway. It was like still very early days in all of this, and so it was all trying to disprove, that like, of course I had no involvement, like, no Russians at all, like the FBI was trying to interview him because they did interview him, I think, for hours and hours, and so he was telling me about that. It's just he's an odd guy, odd gentleman.
Let's play a second of
him. You know what it is with him? Actually, I'm sorry, before you play it, is that he can't help himself. He's one of those people that just like keeps talking, even though it's clearly not in his best interest.
Oh.
And he was doing that in the
clear.
green room, and he does it on TV all the time.
I've only listened to a little bit of the Mueller report through Audible, but you get that impression in that too, actually.
You have been the Edward R. Murrow of this whole process.
Wait, play it again. This is the Sean Hannity.
You have been the Edward R. Murrow of this whole process.
What I remember about Carter Page now, actually, which is really funny, is that when it was all in the, and I was, I'm sure I wasn't following it as closely as I should have been, but like in the first news reports before he said anything, you really had this like, oh shit, like, all right, here's this like dude who like worked for like some bank and he was the secret conduit. Like he had this whole like mystique built around him. So you kind of were like, oh, well, I mean, shit, that guy's like, he's not going to say a thing until like he's forced to in a court proceeding. And then he was just
on TV all the time, nonstop.
Just like could not keep his fucking mouth shut. And basically,
you are the Edward R. Murrow. That is incredible.
Of this whole process. So, all right, so lead us through this thing. What's going on with Russia?
Which thing are we talking about? Okay, with Russia.
Let's start with that because there's a lot to get to with it.
There is. I mean, basically, and this came out in this news cycle an eternity ago. I think it was on Saturday. The New York Times had a big piece about how the United States and Cyber Command, Cybercom, as they call it, was basically going on the offensive when it came to cyber operations and coming up with ways to infiltrate Russia's electrical grid, which isn't the first time that something like this has necessarily been brought up or reported. Like, it wasn't really so shocking. And we know, obviously, the cyber warfare has become a key and critical part of what any nation is doing as part of their national security and defense. And of course, Russia has been a very aggressive actor in this state too, where they've launched massive cyber attacks where they did shut down the grid in Ukraine for a couple of hours. There were some reports coming out that they had accessed, I think it was like a nuclear plant somewhere here in the United States.
I thought that was debunked.
Was it? Well, I think that it wasn't. Was it the same story?
Honestly,
I do remember there was one story that was debunked, but then I think that there were other stories, but they haven't ever done anything with it, right? The whole game thus far has just been, look, we have the capacity to potentially implant ourselves, access certain things. There was also another story where I was listening actually to The Daily, where Michael interviewed David Sanger, who was the reporter on this story, about a case in like 2008 when Russia had just like sprinkled USB drives around military bases, and then people, like US military personnel used them and put them into the system computers, and that gave Russia access to all this communications, like classified communications by the Defense Department, to where they were so unprepared that at one point they were just gluing shut the USB holes on computers. And so the things that are going on. But he also pointed out that was in 2008, and the United States didn't even have. Obviously, they had the NSA, but they didn't have a cyber command yet at that time, and so we're completely really unprepared, it seems. And so now it obviously makes sense to everybody that on a big scale, as part of your defense, you have to be prepared for things like this, right? Like, I think any American would want to know that the United States government is preparing and checking out how vulnerable any of our electrical grids or any other things like that are to cyber attacks.
Versus offense.
On defense.
Yes.
Now, on offense, this is really kind of terrifying and serious stuff if you're talking about doing damage to another country's electrical grid.
Or
right?
even look at what Stuxnet did, right? Like that, that targeted Iran, which is problematic in and of itself, and then it set off basically a giant global computer virus.
Yep.
Right. So yeah.
But with the electric grid, just think of all the people that depend on everything that's connected to it, and
Definitely.
so a lot of people could die.
Yes.
If you do something like that. And I think that the kind of agenda is obviously, people mention a Cold War type of deterrence. And so it's more just to show muscle and might to Russia that we have this capability. And so maybe they wouldn't be as willing to act on theirs. But the part of the story that everybody has kind of been freaking out about and making a big to-do about is that Cybercom didn't, multiple sources basically told the New York Times that they don't know if Donald Trump knows that any of this is going on. And that's because they have been, kind of trying to avoid having to tell him because they don't trust him. They don't know if he's going to pass on this information to other foreign leaders. They don't know how he's going to react to it. There have been so many reports about other things where Trump never wants to hear about vulnerabilities in our election system or any kind of Russian hacking because it makes him feel insecure, because it throws the 2016 election into question, because we have this thin-skinned man baby as president. you can't show things with John McCain's name on them too.
Well, to be fair, you can't do that around me either. I don't want to hear about that fucking guy or his daughter.
So in response, first, you have the president of the United States.
We have this tweet up, guys.
Yeah, tweeting, do you believe that the failing New York Times just did a story stating that the United States, I'm sorry, I
try
gave up.
Give it a try. Give it a pass.
Is substantially increasing cyber attacks on Russia. Now I feel like I just sound like you.
I like it.
And he called this an act of treason by a once great paper. So first he called
so
it
desperate for
treasonous to report on this.
Yes,
and then
which
in his
is a pretty big escalation.
And he goes, also not true. So it's like, well, is it treason because you claim that they just exposed some type of really, classified national security information, or is it not true? It doesn't really make sense that it's one or the other. And of course, the New York Times then came out and said, actually, the way that we do with most of our national security reporting, we did warn the government ahead of time that we were going to publish this. We asked them if there was anything that would be so damaging to national security that we can't put it out there, and they didn't say no.
Wait, so you know what Trump is doing here, though? Trump is saying, how the FBI entraps dim-witted Muslim kids all the time into these fake terrorism cases. They're like, hey, do you want to blow up the Sears Tower? And they're like, yeah, could you also get me
you can buy a bunch of bombs.
Yeah. And the kid's like, yeah, can you throw me some Mario Kart too? And they're like, definitely. And then they destroy some kid's life over this. I feel like Trump, he's basically, that's what he's saying, right? He's just like, yeah, it was totally a fake story to see whether or not the New York Times would do it.
Whoa.
And they did, so it's treason.
Or maybe the New York Times just wanted to goat Trump and see if he would respond and be like, maybe did he just find out about this from our reporting, or did he really know?
Oh, shit.
And maybe his response is going to tell them.
He's going to tell them.
Boom.
Either way, it's treason. No, I'm just kidding. I shouldn't say that. So, but wait, so then we're going to go to these other tweets, because this is actually so regardless of what you think of Trump, and obviously Trump is the worst human being on the planet besides Bolsonaro. This isn't complicated. He's disgusting. But this is a familiar theme of the resistance versus Trump, which is as long as it's anti-Trump, we can completely throw away any disturbing implications. Like, take a completely different case, right? Say President Bernie's there and he says, I don't want you, destabilizing the Haitian government, say, because they're introducing a minimum wage for their people. And the intelligence community is like, okay, yeah, we hear that. We're going to go back to doing that, right? Like, no one is looking at the deeper implications of, like, obviously Trump is Trump and there's the drama, and it's obviously a problem that he calls journalists doing journalism treason, of course, all kidding aside. But it's actually a really dangerous scenario.
Well, what's dangerous about it is that not only, first there was, since Trump came to office, there was a national security order that he signed saying that Cybercom didn't have to check with him on everything, because it's like this active scenario where you can't possibly keep up with every single thing. Then Congress, in last year's National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, essentially said that all of these cyber activities are the same as like traditional military activities. And so that just gave Cybercom even more free reign to do whatever the hell they want. So technically, they don't really have to check with the president. But that should be disturbing to all of us, right? Absolutely. Because we're supposed to have a military that is controlled by a civilian branch at the end of the day. You know, we're not a military state. You have unelected officials here otherwise at the military just doing whatever they want to do without checking with the president. And yes, this president is a, dangerous and scary individual for a lot of reasons, but people are so hyper-focused on him that they're kind of missing the forest for the trees, which is, now you also just have this kind of increasingly expanding powers that, the Cybercom and the military have. And I'm not one of those people that likes to like go on and on about the deep state and whatever, but this is at the same time very true. Here you have people they'll probably still be there, a lot of them, after Trump leaves, maybe even after the next president. And increasingly these types of powers just expand, and people don't seem to be all that upset about it or focused on it, including, I feel like there were a lot of civil libertarians during the Obama administration who paid such close attention to every little report like this. And it's not the same. I mean, it's always like a lonely road being on the caring about civil liberties. But even more so, I see some people in that camp now so hyper-focused on Trump that it's like, you guys, like, remember, this is something that, we should be just at least discussing, debating as a society and as a country, especially if we're now going to that level where where our government's going to be okay with maybe doing damage to another country's electrical grid. There are no international binding rules at this moment. Certainly not that the United States is a part of.
And we wouldn't follow it regardless.
No. We never signed any international agreements because we always want to be like the exception and be allowed to do whatever we want.
So let's pull up some of these tweets that go along with what you're saying. So this is Glenn Greenwald making the point that you're making, basically, right? The Pentagon is purposely hiding extremely sensitive and highly dangerous military operations from an elected president because they fear they'll tell them to stop. Anyone who thinks the U.S. is a deep state that acts without accountability is an unhinged conspiracist. Yes, I mean, that's sorry to say that Glenn has a good point.
And a very Glenn point.
Very Glenn point, very accurate point. And then here is...
All right, so this is in response to first read the David Frum.
Okay, I'll read David Frum. So David Frum, though, is the quintessential example of somebody who gets to launder themselves through the Trump era, right? Like this person who still, as of today, the Bush administration has way more blood on its hands than Trump. Like, just objectively, in terms of the sheer body count of the military operations the Bush administration took on after September 11th, not to mention the torture program, not to mention, yes, it was amplified by Obama and it's horrific under Trump, but drones started under Bush. Mm-hmm. Actually, they predate Bush. But at any rate, David Frum wrote The Axis of Evil speech and is a far-right figure. And because, he's willing to come out and say that
he's an anti-Trumper.
Donald Trump is a baddie. That's enough for a lot of people. The U.S. military is not briefing a U.S. president on a major cyber warfare operations against a hostile foreign power because they do not trust the president to not betray those operations to that hostile power. This is David Frum, very Frum. And then Corey Pine, crew on TMBS, says, or unelected military figures exert unilateral control over foreign policy. Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding.
And that's going to work. And that's going to relate to the Iran stuff that we're going to get to actually in a
Yep.
little bit. So, I mean, I think there's a whole set of things like this, though, where people are missing major institutional problems and precedent because they're so fixated on a grotesque, dangerous, all the adjectives you can use. I'm not minimizing any of them. Donald Trump is a huge problem. But there's no strategy, no analysis beyond that.
But it was the same thing with Obama because, you know, there was a whole wing of the political establishment that was so enamored,
Right.
you know, with
That's
the
right.
kind of like cult of personality that surrounded him that they also willfully ignored and avoided having to really see what was going on. And of course, you had incredible reporting through all those years. You know, especially like the Washington Post, right? Did they do the Top Secret America, where they showed how many people you have who have top security clearance, who aren't even full-time government employees, the contractors, just how much this sprawling state keeps growing and growing. And there was a lot of really good national security reporting all those years, but I just feel like they're never the things that make headlines. It's never what you see being discussed on cable news. It's not even what you really see being like a hot story on Twitter or trending on Twitter.
No, and when the NSA
and I get
story-
it's like it's dense, you know, and a lot of people feel like it's probably out of their purview, out of their control. You have the experts handling it, but it's really some scary stuff that we're dealing with.
Well, we'll get to Iran in a second, but I mean, this is the same point. This is Marco Rubio. This is little Marco. Career military
Little
commanders,
Marco.
not politicians, have dictated U.S. force posture in the Middle East based on their informed and expert assessment. Those who continue to raise doubts about the threats are basically calling these military leaders liars.
How dare they?
I mean, that's extraordinary. that is like an objectively fascist statement. I mean, and when the NSA spying was revealed under Obama, the most coherent argument that people actually had that defended the program, because you couldn't defend that level of spying and that level of lack of accountability, not just in the NSA, but all the private companies that went along with it. And people just say, like, I trust Obama to be able to oversee that program. That was actually the bottom line. And it was exactly, you're right. It was exactly the inverse of just like total personality centric approach to policy. Just in one case, Obama can have an unaccountable global drone war and spy on whoever he wants because we trust him. And now in this case, the intelligence and military apparatus can instigate incredibly dangerous moves for other countries and don't even tell Trump because, you know, he's Trump.
And again, yeah, like I get it that you can't, that Trump is an irrational actor. And I think, you know, a dangerous person to be in the position of commander in chief and as the president. But that doesn't mean that we have to just throw all of our eggs in like the intelligence community and, you know, the defense community basket as if like they're going to be our saviors. And I feel like we've seen it time and time again throughout
Well, it's
this
also
whole
like, how did
administration.
those people get? Yeah, but and I think it also does go back to Obama and Homeland and this whole like.
And Congress is allowing it.
Congress allowed it, and then on a cultural level, people got super comfortable. Like 24 was like the Bush era, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
Peter Sutherland just needs to fucking torture it out. But then like Homeland was all like, well, yeah, we have to go and kill a bunch of civilians, and we have to have these ridiculous operations, but like we're sad about it, and we know foreign languages, and that made the people with that cultural affinity feel comfortable. When fundamentally, like, you cannot feel comfortable with the level of power that the military or intelligence apparatus has, just objectively. You don't even need to view it negatively. It just is hugely dysfunctional and disproportionate.
You're just, sorry, I was zoning out because now you're making me feel like I should have watched Homeland.
I
But I didn't know it
it's
had this like
terrible.
sensitive emotional streak.
Oh, it's terrible. I got through one season and I couldn't do it.
Because 24,
No, 24 was
I was
fun.
in college when 24 was on, and we had viewing parties.
Oh,
you
no,
know,
24
every
was
Monday
fun.
night when it was on, and like nobody was allowed to talk. We'd turn all the lights off.
Homeland sucks.
Wow.
Homeland sucks.
Wow. Wait, have you watched any more of Chernobyl since we last spoke?
Yes, I watched the first 3 episodes of Chernobyl. Yes. Was it as bad as? No, I'm just playing.
It's
Yeah.
just. Oh, I was born that year, so you know who knows what impact it may have had on me.
Your tracksuit is glowing.
But just talk about something that is so incredibly dark and sad and grim, and shows you the extent to which in the interest of protecting the reputation of the state, the things that will happen and the things that people will go along with.
The lie structures are
terrifying,
incredible. And again, I'm not going to, it's totally terrifying. And I don't think it's, there's a lot of parallels with how, it's obviously not at the same extreme, but when you purge people from the EPA that are giving you honest reports on climate or whatever else, it's all in the same kind of continuum. Not even to mention, God knows the amount of malfeasance and lies that corporate America has on a daily basis, just even about whether or not a pharma product is comfortable for somebody. So it's just but yes, the way it takes
getting
days,
depressed. I'm just gonna.
Don't worry, we're gonna pick you up.
Sit back and drink.
It is.
Next
That's
time,
when we get
yeah.
You know what it is? Hey, you picked the depressing
I know,
stories.
I feel
when we first talked about it, I was like, I was like, Alona's like, you know what? We can do stories on science. We can check this whole other issue set. And Alona's like, I want to talk about the deep state, Russia, and then Donald Trump's terrorism for immigrant communities. And I think that will really up the emotional tempo.
You just caught me on a weird week where I was reconnecting somehow with some national security news. Yeah. Well, because I had a really bizarre couple of weeks, the last weeks, guys. I was telling Michael that life almost led me down a path where my husband and I became goat farmers in Hawaii at a farm making artisanal goat cheese.
Could have done it via Skype. We still would have worked something out.
Could have just done it. So I really was convinced that I was leaving all of this behind and starting this whole new life. It didn't work out or turn out for various reasons, which I was actually relieved because I wasn't really that stoked on moving to a tiny tropical island in the middle of the ocean that I feel like is going to get swept up and. Feeling I was already getting anxiety about being isolated.
It's not going to happen. Global warming isn't real. Don't worry about it. I'm learning from Chernobyl. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, so
I'm
thinking. Back, not a goat farmer anymore.
So you're just like, Mom, Dad, we're not doing it. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to be in the middle of nowhere. And
but thank you to my husband for being open to that, for being you know what. Let's do it.
I don't really appreciate the standard set being by your husband in those types of instances. That really for those of us who are a little bit iffy on going out of the way on our subway route to try a new place for dinner, to have the new expectation set of I don't go to the middle of nowhere and milk a goat. I don't really appreciate that. Let's keep the expectations down. Let's keep it easy. All right, so we're gonna go to David Griscom. And he is going to do his gem segment because we couldn't get to it last week because of what a tech nightmare that was last week. But again, handled with aplomb by all.
Yeah, and this one wasn't too bad either, honestly.
It wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it's just scary when you get that weird ball.
When you get that weird ball.
Say what?
The floating beach ball of death.
Oh, I call it the spinning wheel of death, but it does look like a beach ball.
There's nothing to worry about with our spinning ball.
Nothing to worry about. It's going to be totally fine.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the beginning of a bad trip, actually. The way that colors start to intensify. You're like, oh, fuck.
My computer is just so fucked that I just see it every time I open it. My laptop, so it's I'm desensitized.
Yes,
it doesn't trigger me anymore.
I'm totally there with my laptop too. I'm just hey, you know what? You take a minute.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah,
it's fine.
I'll push the button,
relax.
Force the restart.
You know what? I'm gonna go get a glass of water, and hopefully you'll sort yourself out. David, what's going on in the world of economics?
Yeah, a few things are going on, but one thing that everyone's been focusing on is the upcoming G20 summit.
Yes.
But earlier this month, there was already the G20 summit for finance ministers and central bankers. And it ended with a joint statement, which included a pledge to use all the policies they can to protect global growth from disruptions due to trade and other tensions. And the kind of language, games that they play to put into these statements is really tricky and political. So the fact that they came out so explicitly against the trade battle that's going on between Trump and China right now is very significant. And obviously that was pretty much what everybody was talking about during the summit was the tension between China and the United States. But this is coming at a moment where there was really a global downturn in the U.S. and the U.S. economy and also the global economy. Obviously China and America's trade tensions is playing a lot into this, but the U.S. economy is showing signs of weakening. The Eurozone has been showing little signs of improving.
Well done,
and
David.
Even the powerhouse,
I like that. Multitask analysis.
Even the powerhouse of Germany has also been weakening over the past couple of weeks. And most importantly, when you really start to see how weak the structure is getting, the BRIC countries are facing massive downturns. Just 2 weeks ago, global drops in the price of oil, which the international economy and especially the United States are overdependent on, only worsen the situation. And just to give you guys a little bit of context, for example, in May, the United States only added 75,000 jobs, which is a huge drop from the previous past few months of growth. We've seen low oil prices, treasury bonds showing lower yields. Other bad indicators, including retail and factory orders, went down in April, which is showing trouble amongst business sentiment. So, and then one more thing that's really important actually is that home starts have gone down just recently. So that means people are less likely to be building homes and pursuing. So it's showing a downturn in the U.S. housing market. So the big question is, what is the Federal Reserve going to do? Are they going to lower rates again? And most people are looking at that as that's a very likely thing to happen. A lot, especially people on Wall Street, really want to see that. But, we really need to start talking about the difference between the financial fantasy world and the real economy. We've been living through an economy that's been buoyed by the asset prices. And let me just put this graph up real quick. This is actually really fascinating. Do you mind if we zoom in a little bit here, Matt, so people can see it?
Enhance. Computer, enhance. All right, go ahead, David.
So it's not, it might be a little difficult for people to read, but this blue line here, that's corporate profits, and that red line is wages paid to workers. So you see, it's really interesting though. You see that actually, for the most part, the stock market does, react to bad news. So you see that it's a little bit more volatile, but for the most part, throughout American history, it actually has, trended with, wages for workers. But starting in 2000, when you really start to see the Federal Reserve change their policy to really focusing on the stock market specifically, and then especially after the financial crisis, you see that there's really been a complete divorce between corporate profits and wages paid to working people. So it's something that we really need to start, thinking a lot more about, is that, this use of monetary policy to fix an economy that has just fundamental inequities, that we really need to start talking about fiscal policy. We're talking about stimulus, to working people, to, something like a Green New Deal, to really get the U.S. economy rolling. Because what we've been doing is playing this game trying to create cheap money so that people can buoy asset prices. Has not been working. It's exceptionally prone to crisis.
And that's been the story since the late 70s, basically. I mean, if you look at when that kind of, at the very least, the basic social democratic arrangement in Western Europe and particularly the United States is you eliminate all of those protections. There hasn't been a real wage increase since the 70s. So you flip it onto basically cheap credit for people to hide the fact that they can't afford the necessities of their life. We know the statistic that over half of the people in this country cannot even get together a couple $100s in the case of an emergency. So people put things on credit cards and so on. So even though the deficit as a national problem is bullshit and a right-wing talking point, there's a lot of personal debt of people that's a huge problem.
Absolutely.
Student debt, medical debt, and otherwise, that needs to be taken care of basically just in giant cancellations. And it shouldn't be means tested. That's another annoyance about, some of the things that even liberal, people are putting together. Stephanie Kelton pointed out, who's Bernie's, one of his economic advisors, she's like, look, just make student debt relief universal. And if you're worried about it, trust me, Jeff Bezos and the Koch brothers, their family don't have student debt.
Yeah.
So make it a non-complicated, no bullshit program and get rid of it. Because by the way, even for people who are relatively off, more privileged, like someone going into law or medicine or something, they're still losing a massive amount of their income to these things. And that hurts the overall economy and their own trajectory, even in a more privileged position.
And talking about that, it's like what we were talking about earlier with Bernie Sanders' speech. You've seen the explosion in debt for individuals, in student loan debt, in credit card debt, over the past 20 years.
Yes.
Is it any surprise that that's gone on at a period of time when there's been a huge increase in financialization and financial profits? Of course not.
Right.
So what Stephanie Kelton there is talking about is really important too, because that's a way, we can make the argument we need people to, not be under student debt relief. This is also a way that we can sort of pull back a lot of that debt that's been created and is holding a lot of working people down out of private hands.
I think debt relief as a frame from student debt cancellation to canceling debt in the Caribbean and elsewhere is actually a big frame for left-wing politics, in my opinion.
Need to float the Jubilee concept.
There needs to
again.
be a global Jubilee because there's so many arrangements that are locked in on illegitimate debt. I mean, just even go like Haiti paid off France to not reinvade it for liberating itself from being a slave state.
Yeah.
That's a demented, and it plays the same role in why banks are able to exploit Haiti today, down to on a different. Obviously, it's a totally different thing, but student debt in this country, it's a ludicrous. Get rid of it, reset it, and reclaim wealth, or come up with some silly bucks scam in a novelty bullshit candidacy. But we're not talking about that now.
Cancel it. Just
Trigger
cancel
alert. Just cancel
We
it.
need cancel culture to.
Yeah. Get counselor. Yeah. Stop worrying about bothering everybody who's funny or whatever, and go cancel debt, not people. That's the new
I
slogan.
like that.
It's not bad.
Well done. Not people.
I think we found a T-shirt.
That's a good one. This system is canceling a lot. Don't worry about it. Let's reset. So before we get to Iran, Alona, let's spend a few minutes talking about, I know you want to talk about this immigration stuff. It is really important. It is just absolute terrorism. So, lead us through that.
It is. So
we should definitely talk about that.
Before we even get to this tweet, this tweet from AOC.
Yeah, you set it up.
Trump tweeted again. I don't have the actual tweet pulled.
We don't even need, this is the thing that I agree. Like, don't reward the motherfucker.
Okay, fine. Basically, he claimed that there was going to be a mass immigration arrests and the removals of quote unquote millions of illegal aliens starting next week. We already know that the policies of this administration are just completely disgusting and dehumanizing when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the detention policies. And so here he is like on the same day that he's relaunching or kicking off his 2020 presidential campaign.
Can you do that again? What is this the Donald Trump re-election campaign? Doing a little jig.
Vote for me,
All
2020.
Right, yeah. More of the Russian connection. Oh, by the way, apparently Bernie Sanders is streaming a response to his announcement tonight as well. I just love that Bernie is starting to piss me off a little bit because all of us in this room work really hard, but like, we're young and we still get tired. This like guy is just like, I'm doing a response, and then we're going to end the war in Yemen. Then we're going to free Lula. Then I gotta dunk on somebody.
I gotta do a post game on Periscope after I'm done with
literally.
Twitch.tv/Bernie Sanders. We're playing the new division game.
But is that something like? Does that come with age? Like you just want to be more active, or does that just mean Bernie Sanders has always been so much more active than?
That's hard to tell. He must have always been pretty active.
I think so.
I don't think
my mom's like that. Like my mom I talked to her and she's like, I just like, was on 7 flights in the last 10 days because she's traveling all the time for work and she's insane. She doesn't sleep. She's turning 70.
I met your mom.
She was also an Olympic athlete though. So it's like, well, you were kind of doing it all along.
Actually, Bernie apparently was. I mean, he wasn't an Olympic athlete, but he was actually a very good track runner. And I mean, he was actually an athlete. Maybe that's the. Oh, here he is. Here, we'll get back to the important stuff in a minute, but this is pretty key. Check out Bernie with this fake.
Whoa.
Check that shit. How's my dick taste, kid? Oh!
The bank was open on Father's Day.
The bank was open on Father's Day.
Pump fake you out your shoe.
Amazing.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oops.
And what's that? Oops. Oh,
sorry. And one. That's an and one.
He doesn't even jump. He's just laying it. He's good.
It's an and one, you little shit.
Yeah. How's that? You were bitching about an allowance?
Nice entry pass.
Yeah. Medicare for all doesn't cover this.
Ooh, alley-oop.
Wait, can you? I wanted to make one
you're gonna
more.
Hey, you just got a free college education right there.
You were talking about upping your social media game.
Yeah, tell me.
Earlier in the show, and can you guys pull up your Instagram page? Is it possible?
We're doing a real-time critique for our Instagram page. You out of your mind?
Oh shit! I don't know. It had like
which one?
It had it was about the Chicago show, and it was the pictures of all of you guys.
Oh well, don't. Okay, because Theo does a good job.
Do you already know what I'm gonna say?
No, I don't know what you're gonna say. Tell me.
I love you all. I love you all in this room, but it just cracked me up because it was like, hey, can't wait to come check out our Chicago show. It's gonna be amazing. And then it was just 4 pictures of 4 white dudes side by side, and I was like, wow, that is so original, guys.
No, you are being totally wrong because Gene is from the Middle East. So way to fuck up, Alona.
All right, well, I didn't know that.
Just
this black and white
incredible
photo,
insensitivity, and you're erasing his Kurdish identity in this like totally privileged way that you're like navigating this space in this like really otherizing way. And then when you include the fact that I had family,
because I don't know who he is, but in this picture,
and then the fact that I had
literally just looks like 4 white dudes, and I was like, come on,
I had
guys.
families in the Holocaust. So that's another thing that's going on. Nat and David are both significantly Native American.
I was just
so
hoping.
you
I'm
just
hoping.
Deeply fucked up.
I'm just hoping that you spend a lot of time talking about reproductive rights for women.
I have to say I can't. I mean, I would have preferred to have this critique after we sold out the Chicago live show, but I will say that the New York and LA live shows were much better and much more reflective in this regard of what we usually do on the show. But we don't. I mean, the truth is we don't have the same Chicago network that we do other places. No,
it's gonna be a great show no matter what.
It is gonna be a great show.
I'm so sorry, Gene.
Yeah, I couldn't
whitewashed.
believe it. You whitewashed
your
Gene.
identity. They did in the Photoshop.
He's trying to flame it on the Photoshop. Whatever. He's white. Let's just keep it real. Gene's white.
To immigration. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Back to immigration. Hey guys, can you guys give a call about Alona? Sorry. Go ahead. I mean, she's Russian. I don't know what the fuck she's doing here.
So anyway.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Already.
All right. Let's wait. Hold on. Let's do a 10-second gap between the dunk on the poster and the story about the American Gestapo. Let's just do 10 seconds.
Never even let me co-host again.
Should have never been thought of.
Wait, it should have been stopped at the idea phase. All right.
And where it should have stopped is at the deal standpoint, where they thought about it.
Okay.
Was I supposed to be listening to something?
Oh, you were?
You guys, I have like a hairdo to keep up. I can't just have, giant headphones on all the time.
I know. I think we need to get you proper headphones.
Do you need me to?
Yeah, play the drop. No. We got it. It's fine. Oh, she wants to hear it now.
And where it should have stopped is at the deal standpoint, where they thought about it.
Do you know what that's referencing?
I don't.
Oh my God, that's referencing. Literally, that's referencing.
Let's give another hint.
Okay.
Bad deal. Should have never been
Oh, the
thought
Iran
of.
deal?
No.
The nuclear deal?
No.
And they had the worst cover-up ever.
That was his response to Saudi Arabia murdering Jamal
Oh,
Khashoggi.
Jesus.
It was a bad deal, and it should have stopped.
Bad
It
deal.
should have stopped at the idea phase, and it was, and it was the worst
God.
cover up that he ever saw, which is clearly the part
Should
that
have
upset
stopped
him.
at the idea phase?
Yes, should have stopped.
And where it should have stopped
can't
is
believe
at
I've
the
heard
deal
this before.
standpoint, where they thought about it.
I like how when you translate Trump, it still just definitionally makes more sense. Like it should have stopped at the idea phase, but what did he actually say? Just one more time.
And where it should have stopped is at the deal standpoint, where they thought about it.
All right. Okay. So that same individual talking about a journalist being dismembered while he was alive, what does he have in store for this nation's immigrant community?
So, as I was saying,
Yes.
in addition to all of the damage that has already been caused to the undocumented community, to the people who are at the border, who are in detention camps, now Trump is promising a mass immigration arrests and the removals of millions of illegal aliens, quote unquote aliens, starting next week. It's one of those things where if you think about it, the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, they don't even have the resources to just start removing millions of undocumented people. There's 11 million in the country, and they're already understaffed and stretched thin. And so it's something that isn't even really physically possible. They also, again, here said that they want to focus on families, which obviously raises a lot of questions as to, people have brought up, like, and what are you going to do if children are in school or at summer camp and you're just going to deport their parents and then the kids are just left behind? Obviously, they don't care about separating families. We've learned that.
We know this.
And as I was saying, it is timed, I think, not, uncoincidentally, not coincidentally. I'm ESL sometimes. I was born in another country. And timed with the kickoff of his re-election campaign. And we know that he obviously used really awful xenophobic, anti-immigrant language the first time around in 2016 to rile up certain members of the base, and I think that he's trying to go for it again. So all of this is horrible and disgusting. And then in conjunction, there's been this massive debate on Twitter today, where if you look on Twitter,
you guys have this up now.
Concentration and concentration camps are trending on Twitter, and you want to be like, what the fuck, and why is this trending? And so it all started with AOC, and she referenced the detention camps and called them concentration camps, which then started this whole like shitstorm where Liz Cheney.
This is up now, right?
Liz Cheney decided to chime in and say, please, AOC, do us all a favor and spend just a few minutes learning some actual history. 6 million Jews were exterminated in the Holocaust. You demean their memory and disgrace yourself with comments like this. So she uses exterminated, which of course is very dehumanizing to the 6 million people who were killed in the Holocaust. And then, since then, it's like everybody.
I think we know what word they use privately in that household.
Talking about, but then it's like it's getting into the semantics of what a concentration camp is versus a death camp, and how obviously there's a long history of concentration camps, and they've been, used in South Africa and France and Cuba and the Soviet Union, in the United States when we interned Japanese Americans, and once again with what's happening now. But you have this group of like the Liz Cheney type of people who are now using anti-Semitism, or at least trying to, as this gross like political kind of ping pong in a place where it clearly doesn't even belong.
I have a couple of.
But this is like it's enhanced interrogation. It's not torture.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
exactly
if you're really
what it
upset over the semantics rather than what's happening to the people who are in detention, then
that's
shows
100%
so wrong.
And that's why, that's 100% what it is. And I just like moving backwards. I mean, I just think first of all, this is why in general we probably do spend so much time mocking pedant culture online, because when you use like the technicalities of things to obscure the realities of things, this is an extreme version of what you're doing here. A funny trivial version was when we made fun of a West Wing clip recently, which was horrible and embarrassing to even watch. And my favorite comment I saw is, they never provided an argument as to why that clip was bad. And it's like, we were making fun of it. We're not arguing about it. We're making fun of a self-evidently, horrifyingly stupid clip. And when you get into like this second order focus about like, well, actually, technically, you're missing something profoundly important, which is that children are dying in custody right now. There's a war going on people across this country. It's a difference in kind, not degree, but some of these things did in fact start under Obama, though obviously how it's happening under Trump is a different thing. And I think, and it's different in this sense, to spell it out. Obama did horrific things on immigration with the goal, the mistaken notion, as with so many other things, that, if I prove my bona fides, they will meet in the middle and provide a deal, which of course was not what they were going to do. And then he counteracted it with things like the Dreamers, which is in fact really important. This is the strategy of Trump and these people. They want to cleanse this country, both because a lot of them are racist and white supremacists, and others just strategically. I don't think they care one way or another. It's the same way they're suppressing the vote. It's better for the Republican Party to have a white engineered electorate. And the last thing I'll say, which is totally in line with what you're saying, precisely because the economic scam won't work this time. Like, he did some fake economic populism, but he's governed as a totally traditional Republican. That's not going to work. I mean, he'll do it sometimes, but the reality is he gave huge tax cuts to rich people. He's deregulating corporations. None of the people's needs are being met with regards to like Midwest industrial workers. All he has left is this sort of thing, and he's going to hit it hard. And I also think the last thing, I want to know what you think of this. I feel like yes, logistically, there's no way it's going to be millions of people, but I also think like it could be thousands of people, and it could be way more human suffering and abuse from this administration. And when it's like people go from shock to trance with it. It's almost like they say something truly horrifying, and then it's not quite met, and then people kind of like,
oh, it's not as bad. It was just
right.
a couple thousand families.
Yeah. And which is I mean, one family this being done to. We've already had multiple children die in these conditions. People are being tortured at the border, being held in ice containers, literally.
And this is Jacob Sobroff, who is a friend of mine, and he has done amazing reporting at MSNBC and NBC on this immigration story. You know, he did a thing today where he also pointed out that no matter what, the impact of even putting out a tweet like this is terrorizing millions of people across this country who are already living in uncertainty and fear all the time. And then this is just driving it even further, you know, and this is why we've seen people who they don't want to go to hospitals, right? They don't want to send their children to schools. Like, you're afraid then to engage and interact with society in all the ways that you should be able to as a human being because of the message that's being put out there.
That's such a good point. And I also just think, you know, I would add, I've been saying this a lot, and I think like, look, long-term goals about like a borderless world and this type of thing is beautiful and great. That's cool. And there's some version of it that has actually happened in Europe, obviously. But in the short term, you need to get candidates to get super specific on demilitarizing the border and making this not like, no one's going to run for president on the notion of getting rid of U.S. borders, but you can get them to be highly specific on how are you going to stop these programs? How are you going to demilitarize the process? You can have a vetting process that isn't done in this horrific military way. And also, how are you going to, you know, basically, I wouldn't use the word amnesty, but amnesty for people who are here.
And then you're going to be against border security?
Against border security. Oh, I've been against border security for a long time. All right, let's, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Iran. Because this is also like the other
show is.
But we're still making it fun, Alona.
Yeah. Why do you think I'm trying to, like, you know, make fun of you guys, cut you down a little in between?
You're doing
just
great.
Trying to lighten the mood.
You're doing great.
Got my Jeb cup right here.
Did Jeb's performance in the election disappoint you? Were you ready for Jeb?
Mm-hmm. I went full exclamation point.
This is beanbag.
Actually, you know, if you want another palate cleanser before we talk about Iran, do we have some like painful clip of Jeb as a throwback that we could look at for a second?
This is not beanbag.
Because they were really funny. Wait. Do you remember that clip that we used to play? We had a couple of weeks where we played it every show, where he would. Oh, we got to find this for Alona. It's the Thug Life one. No, the one where remember when he's at like the Nashua, like Gowanus Club or something.
You can never, as a politician, chase what people think.
It's on YouTube. Look up Jeb Bush Thug Life. I'm serious. Do you remember that? And the guy just kicks him off stage. Okay, yeah, we got it. All right. You want a palate cleanser, Alona?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I think this is this the one with the guy?
I think so.
We need the Thug Life version. All right,
Veterans Affairs get cut off, like Social Security, maybe Medicare, and others. They stop. But the benefits inside the Department of Veterans Affairs continue, which is, you know, it's like it's like a nightmare after a nightmare. And it took them 9 months to fix it. This is a real story here in New Hampshire. I can promise you the best way to show respect outside of rebuilding our military to men and women in uniform is to fix that mess as fast as I can. That's it. Thank you. You're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.
That's not it, though. We got to get it with the musical enhancement.
Okay.
And then he
He's just so awkward. I just can't believe that that's somebody who was a governor. Or,
Really?
you know, in any way was like in politics because he is so awkward when he speaks.
Does that really surprise you, though?
A little bit.
I guess yeah.
I don't know.
There's a lot of people who are pretty awkward in politics. I got to look for this one more time. What?
Okay.
You know, this was
Who else
so
is
funny.
awkward in politics right now?
Well, I mean, how would you define? I mean, I guess he's not awkward. But
How would you
Ted
define
Cruz
Are they
is-
awkward or gnarly?
No, it's wicked or gnarly.
Yeah, I know. I'm just, switching it up a bit.
Oh shit! I can't. Did they actually take this down?
Yeah, I don't see it anywhere.
This is so depressing. What they did was they thug lifed it, but instead of Jeb, obviously, they just thug lifed that little guy who kicked him off.
Guess what? Popular sentiment changes.
Because he's just literally like, he's like, they're kicking me out the door. And the guy's like,
And
yep,
they're just
that's
like, yeah,
exactly what I'm
get
doing.
the fuck out of here. Putting us all to sleep, buddy.
They drop the Dre and they give him shades and a spliff. And the Chiron's like, the Nashua whatever club accepts absolutely no bullshit.
Oh, man.
Like, get the fuck out. It's great. All right. Let's do a little Iran talk.
Okay.
It is
I
important.
did just get a notification about Bella Hadid on my cell phone, but let's talk
What about
Iran.
Bella Hadid? Go ahead. Give us.
I don't know. She apologizes for an offensive picture after a furious backlash.
This sounds like something I could totally
some-
skip out on.
something that where she got accused of racism. I don't know. This is my first time even hearing about this. But she said it was an honest mistake. She posted a picture of her shoe.
Her shoe?
Now this HuffPost story is like doesn't even make sense. The words are flying together. So let's just say that
One day I'm gonna get you to violate your NDA on Ariana. It's a lifelong project. I gotta hear those stories.
God, signing they're not NDAs, they're non-disparagement agreements.
So
and
how could
I've
you-
now been laid off from 2 jobs.
So can you
in
say
my
anything
journalism
about Ariana?
career, and it's in a non-disparagement agreement in order to receive the severance, which you're always in the situation where you're like, well, I can't say no to the money, like I just lost my job,
right?
And so you then just supposedly aren't allowed to ever talk
Tell
about the
fun
company.
stories.
Yeah, the
about
capitalists
Ariana
shouldn't be able to
Huffington.
hold that money from you anyway.
Yeah, well, that's
Like that. Well, I just had to. The last time I signed one, I also had to insert then like, fine, it has to be mutual. Like mutuality, you can't talk shit on me either.
This is not beanbag.
This is not beanbag. That's what
I don't know why that made me feel better about it, but I was like, goes both ways.
Yeah, no, of course. I like that.
Give me my money. All right.
Did they accept that?
Yeah. But also, like, I called a lawyer friend, and so then when I called the lawyer, the legal counsel for the company, and said all of this, I felt like really.
You felt like you were,
legit.
empowered.
I was like, I've noticed that in Section 4 of this agreement, there isn't a clause about mutuality, which, as I understand, is pretty standard in these types of agreements. And they were like, oh, yes, of course, no problem.
Which I understand is standard sort of agreements. Oh my God. I wish that I had. I've always wanted to look for an excuse to do something like that, but.
To do something like what? Lay someone off?
Like, no. Well, yeah, actually, let's talk about it later.
Yeah, I think I might be got fired from my co-host job after the first night.
No, when the no, it's just to like have like some type of like legal conversation like that.
Yeah,
like,
this is why I have these weird like sick dreams of going to law schools, because I secretly wish I could speak in like legal language that way. Sound really official.
Are you considering it for real?
I don't know, man.
It sounds like post-game talk.
Trying to figure out my life.
This is definitely post-game talk. Do you have that Pompeo clip?
This is like, I haven't even had a couple beers yet.
Don't worry, we'll get you ready
Post-game,
for
I'll
the
be like,
post-game.
what do I do, Michael?
Yeah, it's like, there's law school, which is bullshit. It's bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. We know
bullshit that I have to spend 4 hours or 4 years of my life.
Wait, I thought it was 3 years.
Well, it's 3 years of law school, but you have like the year of, studying for the LSAT and applying and all that. I mean, obviously you're doing other stuff.
Yeesh.
No, but it's funny because my parents keep being like, well, did you see that Kim Kardashian is becoming a lawyer and, without going to law school?
How is she? What is she just?
There's a law where if you, I don't remember exactly where you have to work, but like you have to put in 4 years of work. And then I think also be able to pass the bar and you can become a lawyer without going to law school. But I'm like, yeah, but for most people, getting that competitive job, they're probably going to look at where you got your law degree. Like, whereas for Kim Kardashian, obviously it doesn't matter. Like, she's Kim Kardashian and can just one day be like, I'm a lawyer,
Kim Kardashian's crushing it.
She is. I think it's great that she's doing all that.
I thought the way she's been getting like more sentences commuted than like many civil rights organizations.
Well, that's the power of celebrity.
I know, it's incredible. But I thought, like,
sadly, but
when she got that sentence reduced of that old woman, like, there was that was another thing where it was like, what good? Like, she went to this idiot, she got an audience with him because he worships celebrity, and she saved somebody's life. Excellent. And nobody's under any illusion that he's anything other than a racist who will promote the prison industrial complex.
Except for maybe Kanye West.
Turning Point USA.
Don't speak. Well, they're intentional.
They're still trying to butter up. They wrote a big long thing about how great Kim Kardashian is the other day.
Oh my God. I thought Kanye tapped out. I thought he wasn't doing politics.
Well, he kind of tapped out after Candace Owens said that he designed the Blexit shirts, but that was kind of just a tap out to protect the brand. I don't think it was much more beyond that.
We never know when he'll be back too. He's an unpredictable guy, that Kanye.
I wish we did a breakfast show together. She's like, we don't know. He's an Michael. He's an unpredictable guy, that Kanye. Anyways,
I would love to host a morning show if I didn't involve the whole getting up early in the morning
post game. We drink margaritas and decide whether or not I should go to law school.
I really just wanted, like, Kathy Lee and Hoda had the best situation when they were hosting that third hour of Today, because they just like always had drinks. They were just getting like wasted at 10 a.m. every morning.
Yeah, really? I never saw.
I don't think they were actually drinking, but like they always had their cocktails.
It'd be cool to post game at like 11:30.
Yeah, I would.
And then you like walk out of the office. You're like, cool, done. Gonna go enjoy the rest of my day.
Go take a nap. Oh my God, go play a game of tennis or something. Sounds beautiful. All right, can you pull it together?
War with Iran? Yes.
Can you pull it together for a few minutes? Get in your mode. Come on, Alona.
Oh, my neck just cracked. All right, seriously.
When I first met Alona, she was very much in that mode. I remember. I think when I was on my first panel with you, I was like definitely the fun one in the segment. It was like you doing a really good job hosting. And then it was like me like being like, yeah, but we can have a little bit of a sense of humor. And then some guy from like, like some conservative from like Human Christian Affairs magazine or something being like,
no, we always tried to like mix it up and have fun. But same thing. We started with the serious topics and we worked our way to the more lighthearted ones.
And you'd be like, it's cocktail hour. And he'd be like, women are humans. So yes. I can vamp too.
Oh my God. Okay.
All right. So let's start with this clip. This is Mike. So everybody knows that in the last couple of days, there was this attack supposedly on a Norwegian and Japanese vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, right? So we'll just play what Mike Pompeo said, which has just been contradicted by basically every available piece of evidence. And then I want to talk a little bit about this piece that Vijay Prashad published on the CIA's Iran Mission Center. And we'll get to that. And also, we'll talk about Adam Schiff and why we should not be empowering people like this. Go ahead.
It is the assessment of the United States government that the Islamic Republic of Iran is responsible for the attacks that occurred in the Gulf of Oman today. This assessment is based on intelligence, the weapons used, the level of expertise needed to execute the operation, recent similar Iranian attacks on shipping, and the fact that no proxy group operating in the area has the resources and proficiency to act with such a high degree of sophistication.
So I just want to quote briefly from this piece. Just hours after it happened, that the explosion on 2 Norwegian and Japanese oil tankers were the responsibility of Iran. This is according to Pompeo. The United States government offered no evidence for this claim except for a grainy video that showed little that seemed conclusive. Pompeo took no questions. And of course, the head of the Japanese vessel company was like, no, this wasn't an attack like that. In fact, we thought it was something that came flying at us, not planted on the ship. The Norwegian vessel said nothing. And it's important to note that Shinzo Abe, the Japanese prime minister, was actually in Iran the day of in an attempt to restart this diplomatic process that has been destroyed by the Trump administration by ripping up the Iran deal. And I just want to go to the sort of bipartisan nature of this catastrophic policy. This is Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff, who has built a whole brand and really, like, regardless, I don't care what you think of the Mueller report or the Russia thing or whatever. In general, I'm quite burned out on this story in both ways, frankly. But whatever you think of it, this guy made objectively hyperbolic claims on a regular basis to build a media profile for himself.
Yes.
While at the same time,
Total blowhard.
Total blowhard. That should be like literally on his Twitter bio, like at Rep Adam Schiff.
At Rep
Total blowhard. Hashtag total blowhard and relentless mediocrity. It took a huge amount of pressure on him to even oppose the Saudi policy in Yemen, as an example. He's totally of the far right Middle Eastern foreign policy establishment. This is what he tweeted out. Evidence of Iran's attack on the ships is strong. We should be leading an international effort to protect the seas and reduce the risk of conflict. Instead, Trump policies have left us isolated in the region. Unstable maximum pressure campaign has failed. So, do you see like the total incoherence of what he's doing there? There is no evidence other than what they provided publicly that Iran did this. And in fact, if you were to sort of game it out and you were going to take the flying object angle a little bit more seriously, the two places that would have the strongest interest in doing something like this would be the Emiratis and the Saudis, who desperately want military conflict with Iran. Then he says we need an international effort to basically reduce tension, which had been ratcheted up because of precisely the attitude he's feeding right there. And then he goes into this vague critique of Trump without specifying it to anything, which is that, yes, this has all been thrown into play because the Trump administration destroyed the Iran deal. I mean, it's just so incoherent, the amount of lanes he's trying to play here. But the bottom line is he's escalating against Iran.
And I'm sorry if I'm just,
make it petty.
Dim. No, I just don't. What was the maximum pressure campaign? Like pulling out of the deal?
Pulling out of the deal,
pressure? But how is that pressure?
Yeah, I mean, that's
we're just
right.
Like,
that's not
sorry,
pressure.
guys, we're out.
Yeah, that's not pressure at all. I mean, threatening the Europeans that they can't engage with Iran either. I mean, they've done all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And all that's happened is like, yeah, the Europeans have actually mainly folded. And then like the Iranians literally are like, yes, we have to pull out of this deal because we're just getting pummeled on every end, down to like there isn't even vital medications there.
Well, also the two countries that would seemingly have the most interest in finding out what happened here are the countries whose oil tankers got bombed.
Right.
And so I love it how it's just like, we should be leading this international effort. And they're like, we're so upset. We're ready to start a war over this. And like, Japan isn't.
No. The Norwegians haven't said anything. Yeah. And the Japanese company
That's so like, Norwegian.
That is super Norwegian.
To not say anything.
Tight lip. Get back to making like organic furniture.
Anyway.
In 2017, the U.S. intelligence agency, CIA, created a special unit called the Iran Mission Center to focus the attention on U.S. plans against Iran. The initiative for this unit came from CIA Director John Brennan, who left the post as the Trump administration came into office. Brennan believed that the CIA needed to focus attention on what the United States sees as problem areas, North Korea and Iran, for instance. This predated the Trump administration. And so this is Vijay Prashad. He basically goes on to talk about how under Obama, this was set up, but in the context of the Iran deal, there was a lot of people inside the group that started to develop a sort of more sophisticated understanding of Iran. When Trump took over, they ended up appointing this guy head of the Iran division, who's this very weird figure in the CIA named Mike D'Andrea, who was in charge of the drone program under Obama and responsible for like a massive expansion of these drone warfare.
Great.
But he's like, I remember there was a New York Times profile of him. He's the same guy. He's like a Muslim. So he like converted to Islam while he was stationed at some CIA thing. And so he's cultivated this like bizarre mystique about him. But the bottom line is he's a huge promoter of drones and extremely hawkish. And he's been coupled with a guy named Thomas Kaplan, who set up two groupings at the White House, two groupings outside of the White House, including United Against a Nuclear Iran and the Counter Extremism Project, which had been running basically propaganda campaigns against Iran from the outside, including blaming Iran for the creation of ISIS, whereas like they're the two prime antagonists in Syria. So that's like a little bit of the context behind it, and I honestly think in a really bizarre way that like Trump's stupidity and concern about getting like pushed into a disaster like that, like if Mike Pence was president, we would have already done this. I do think that this is a one where like this is an unintentional benefit of having Trump be there, because I'm not totally sure that he wants to do this, not because he cares about anybody's well-being obviously, but just because it's risky.
It is, and it's interesting because I mean, in typical Trump fashion, says one thing one moment, another thing the next. I love that there was, a reporter asked him a question about this today on the lawn in front of the White House or behind the White House whenever he's getting on and off Marine One. And he started talking about how, under the Obama administration, Iran used to say death to America all the time. Like, you haven't been hearing that lately. And he's just like on one hand, pulling out of the Iran deal, everything that you mentioned about sanctions and pressure on the Europeans. But he's like, see how much better I made things? They're not saying death to America these days. Like, still taking a weird credit for something that doesn't make sense at all. But I wanted to bring something up. I saw this Politico article earlier too that was looking at the Trump administration potentially, again, this is who knows with Trump actually,
right,
where he would go with it, but potentially just trying to bypass Congress, as Congress has been completely feckless and ineffective and hasn't done anything when it comes to military conflict in the last, I don't know how many.
They're still running all of these operations from the original AUMF.
Well, and so this thing mentions that basically Mike Pompeo was insinuating that that the AUMF that was supposed to be for 9/11 might apply here.
They've been running
and that would be the justification
justification
that they would have to, and they obviously, there's the news this week too that they've deployed 1,000 additional troops to the region. I'm actually surprised, considering that John Bolton is an advisor to Trump, that the Iran situation hasn't escalated much further. I'm thankful that it hasn't, but don't forget, John Bolton's the guy that's been saying bomb Iran for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so is he just ineffective? I mean, I hope so. I hope that's the case, but it's very curious to me.
It's also that they're so bad at this. Even you saw the same thing in Venezuela. They would spread a lie and then it would be contradicted a day later. And there isn't this international anxiety and drumbeat for it.
And it's even in this case, Japan has already said that they're not just willing to accept any assertions from the United States, that they want to see what actually happened. The U.S., the U.S. just thinking that they can just say whatever they want to the American public, and that in itself is a finding. It's absolutely not going to fly on the international stage, luckily, right now.
All right, folks, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the post game where we have the Joe Rogan, Michael Roberts saga to tell. We have to talk about Bernie calling for the freeing of Lula. We have to talk about Andrew fucking Yang. We have the debunk with Ben Burgess. We have your calls. We have your Discord questions. And we are also going to talk about, was it 6 years after the death of Michael Hastings?
It has been, yeah.
We're going to talk about that. and a whole bunch more. So the way you do get to post game and support everything we're doing is by becoming a patron. Patreon.com/TMBS. Get the whole thing. I want to thank everybody on the team. I appreciate all of you. I thank all patrons. Alona is fucking awesome.
This is so fun. Thank you. Next time I'll make sure to highlight specific language because I feel like I'm like, it's something like this.
You're crushing it. Whatever.
I'm just paraphrasing a lot of potentially,
That's what we do.
Serious subjects. I guess that's podcasting.
Yeah, it's called paraphrasing serious subjects. Welcome. In the post game, Alona's gonna get drunk, and actually, probably we all get a little bit.
Yeah, I hope that you have chocolate. Yeah. I need some kind of a snack for the post game too.
Next time we'll get you chocolate. I apologize. This Sunday, Ryan Grimm, an illicit history of the modern Democratic Party, and just a massive amount of content, obviously, as always. We'll see you in the post game.